Usually when you walk into a new environment, say a local coffee shop or a commercial gym, there are signs everywhere telling you exactly what the rules of engagement are.
Right, like order your coffee here, wipe down the machines.
Yeah, wait in this specific line. The social contract is literally printed on the wall for you to read. You don't have to guess how to behave.
Exactly.
But then you walk into a classroom and suddenly all those explicit instructions just vanish. You are simply expected to know how to act, how to ask a question without offending anyone, and, how to just exist in that space.
It's completely unspoken.
It is. And today we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating stack of sources. We've got a mix of English learning materials, pedagogical teacher training guides, and this viral Reddit thread about university etiquette.
It's a great collection.
Yeah, and our mission today is to decode the hidden social, cultural, and psychological matrix of the classroom. Because whether you are a student, an educator, or, just a professional trying to navigate a corporate training environment, understanding how we communicate in these spaces is the ultimate life hack.
It really is.
Yeah.
Because the classroom is, it's far more than just a room with desks and a whiteboard.
Right.
It functions as a complete microcosm of human communication. It's governed by intense power dynamics, unspoken behavioral contracts, and a highly specific vocabulary. And that vocabulary ultimately dictates who succeeds, who gets heard, and who gets left behind.
Which is terrifying if you don't know the rules.
Completely. The rules are entirely implicit. They rely on a shared cultural understanding that often leaves newcomers completely stranded.
And before anyone can even begin to absorb the material being taught, they have to overcome a massive universal hurdle.
The fear of looking foolish.
Exactly. The sheer terror of looking dumb in front of your peers. Let's start right there, with the student's perspective on breaking the silence. A specific concept in our sources immediately jumps out. It states, simply, that silence hides problems.
Yeah, that is such a profound observation. I mean, many people, from young students to adults sitting in corporate seminars, operate under the assumption that learning is just a passive biological function.
Like a sponge.
Right, like you sit quietly, you listen to the authority figure, and you absorb the data. But the reality is that learning is an active, highly disruptive process.
Disruptive, I like that word for it.
Yeah, because when a learner stays silent, the instructor's only logical diagnostic conclusion is that the material has been fully understood. The confusion just remains invisible.
The trap seems to be this overwhelming desire to construct a grammatically flawless, perfectly reasoned sentence before opening your mouth.
Boy, absolutely, the perfectionism trap.
But the sources argue forcefully for the power of simple, honest phrases over perfect syntax. Just raising a hand and saying, I'm confused about this part, or I didn't catch that, is infinitely more productive than sitting in silence.
While you try to mentally translate a masterpiece of a question. Yeah.
Right. Because while you're translating, the lecture just leaves you in the dust. It reminds me of trying to join a fast-moving conversation at a crowded dinner party.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
You can't wait for the perfect pause. You just have to jump in. Learning in a classroom is like swimming. Knowing the mechanics of the strokes, like the grammar, doesn't help at all if you're too terrified to jump into the water.
That's spot on, and the sources highlight a structural difference in how you jump in. Specifically, the distinction between closed and open questions.
Okay, walk me through that.
So, the type of question a learner asks fundamentally alters the feedback they receive. A closed question like, is this correct?
On to forces a yes or no answer.
Exactly. It forces a binary response. It reveals absolutely nothing about the student's underlying thought process. Conversely, an open question like, why is this answer different? Or can you walk me through this step? That invites the instructor to examine the mechanical breakdown of the student's logic.
It opens a diagnostic window.
Yes. And the teacher training materials back this up completely. They emphasize that educators view themselves as guides, not judges. They actively want learners to disrupt the class with requests for help.
But they want specific help, right? Not just, I'm lost.
Exactly. Instead of a vague, unhelpful plea like, could you give me some suggestions? They strongly prefer a targeted request. Something like, could you give me feedback on my logic and organization?
Because of cognitive load, right?
Right. You can think of cognitive load as the amount of working memory, the RAM in your brain being utilized at any given moment.
So, when a student just says, help,
the instructor has to expend massive amounts of cognitive RAM trying to guess where the misunderstanding actually occurred. Was it a vocabulary issue? A conceptual error?
Oh, I see. A targeted question offloads that burden. allowing the teacher to immediately deploy the solution.
Precisely.
Okay, I understand the theory, but let me push back a little on how practical this is.
Sure.
Asking an open-ended, highly analytical question requires a baseline level of mastery. If you are a beginner, or if you're, struggling with the basic terminology of the subject, how are you supposed to possess the vocabulary to analyze your own logic and organization?
That's a fair point.
It feels like asking a novice driver to diagnose a transmission failure while they're merging onto the highway.
That is a very real limitation.
Yeah.
And it's exactly where the psychological aspect of learning becomes a functional tool.
What do you mean?
Well, when you lack the technical vocabulary to frame an academic question, the sources suggest leveraging your emotional vulnerability instead.
Wait, by doing what? Just telling the teacher you're stressed out?
Essentially, yes. Expressing your immediate state of mind provides crucial diagnostic context. Using a phrase like, I feel nervous when I read aloud, or I'm not completely sure, but my instinct is.
Oh, okay.
It gives the instructor actionable data. You don't need perfect grammar or high-level academic vocabulary to state that you feel overwhelmed.
So you aren't diagnosing the academic problem, you're diagnosing your own user experience.
Exactly. It signals to the instructor that the immediate barrier isn't necessarily comprehension. It might be anxiety, or maybe the pacing of the lesson.
Which shifts the whole dynamic of the room.
It stops being an adversarial test of knowledge and transforms into a collaborative troubleshooting process. The teacher can adjust the tempo and create a safer space for the learner.
Now, once a student masters that fear and decides to speak up, the manner in which they deliver their thoughts is entirely dictated by the cultural waters they happen to be swimming in.
Which brings us to the cultural geography of the classroom.
Right, because the unspoken rules of deference and authority vary wildly depending on where you are in the world. There's this viral Reddit thread in our sources that perfectly illustrates this culture clash.
Oh, the Korean university student.
Yes. So a Korean university student was preparing to attend a special lecture given by a visiting American professor, and the student was terrified of being rude, so they went on Reddit to ask for advice on how to properly format a question.
And they shared their standard preamble.
They did. Their default preamble went exactly like this. Hello, thank you for your amazing presentation. I'm a freshman majoring in this subject, and my name is blank. I thought your points on this topic were incredible. I have a question about.
Now, if you analyze that script through the lens of many hierarchical or Eastern educational cultures, it is a structurally flawless, highly respectful way to address a figure of authority.
Because it acknowledges status and builds rapport.
Right, and it demonstrates humility.
But the American commenters on Reddit told the student to delete almost the entire thing.
They did.
The consensus advice was, skip the preamble entirely. Just stand up and say, I have a question about, and get straight to the point.
Which can sound so jarring if you aren't used to it.
It really does. It sounds like the difference between treating a teacher like a revered, wise elder versus treating them like a highly paid consultant where you're watching the hourly meter run. Does this extreme American directness kill respect in the classroom?
I wouldn't say it kills respect. It completely redefined how respect is measured.
Okay, how so?
We often make the mistake of viewing our own cultural baseline as the objective standard for politeness. In difference-based cultures, respect is demonstrated through the careful use of titles, acknowledging the speaker's elevated status, taking time to ease into the interaction.
But in the U.S.?
In the United States, and honestly in many Western corporate and academic settings, respect is demonstrated through efficiency. You show reverence for the professor's expertise by deeply valuing their time.
Wow. Efficiency is the ultimate form of respect.
Exactly. Furthermore, there's a core pedagogical reason behind the American bluntness. Long, elaborate preambles actually break the educational feedback loop.
Because of cognitive load again.
Yes. As one university educator explained in that thread, if a student spends 2 minutes praising the presentation and detailing their academic background, the teacher's cognitive load spikes. Their brain is working overtime trying to anticipate what the actual question will be.
And by the time the question is finally asked,
the errors in the student's logic are just buried under pleasantries.
And there's a cynicism factor too, right? The sources noted that excessive deference can trigger suspicion in Western settings.
It definitely can. If a student heaps excessive praise onto a professor before asking a question, the cultural assumption in the West is often that the student is just kissing ass.
Just trying to flatter their way into a good grade.
Right, rather than engaging honestly with the material.
It's so interesting because we see this desire for efficiency and absolute control instituted from the very beginning of the education system.
Oh, absolutely.
Our sources highlight phrases used by British and American primary school teachers to establish order globally. They use direct physical commands like fingers on lips to forcibly stop side conversations.
Well,
A classic.
but my favorite is the phrase, "Is everybody ready to start?"
Ah, yes. That particular phrase is a masterclass in pragmatics.
Which is the study of how context contributes to meaning, right?
Exactly. Syntactically, is everybody ready to start? Is framed as an interrogative. It has the grammatical structure of a polite question.
But practically, you can't raise your hand and say, "Actually, Mrs. Smith, I need 5 more minutes to finish chatting with my friend."
Precisely. Pragmatically, it is an imperative command. The teacher is leveraging the polite structure of a question to forcefully close the social window and open the academic window.
So it's an illusion of choice.
Yes, the illusion of a choice masks a very hard behavioral boundary. It demands immediate compliance while maintaining a veneer of collaborative politeness.
Which is brilliant.
Yeah.
But if students are dealing with this immense pressure fearing judgment, managing cognitive load, navigating complex cultural landmines about how to speak, the burden inevitably shifts to the teacher.
It does.
So how does an instructor force engagement without making it feel like a hostile interrogation? Well, to understand how educators engineer that aha moment, we have to look at the science of retention. Specifically, a framework known as the learning cone.
The numbers in the sources regarding the learning cone are just staggering.
They really are. The learning cone maps out the biological reality of how human memory encodes information based on the level of active processing. And the data shows that learners retain only about 10% of the material when they receive it passively.
10%.
Just 10%. Simply sitting in a chair, listening to a lecture, or reading a textbook yields incredibly low retention.
Why is that?
The human brain simply does not flag passively received, non-threatening audio as critical data for long-term survival.
Huh.
However, the learning cone demonstrates that when learners are actively teaching the material to someone else, retention spikes to 90%.
90%. That means the vast majority of a traditional hour-long corporate seminar or university lecture is essentially evaporating into thin air as it is being spoken.
It really is. Active teaching forces the brain into a state of retrieval practice. You have to synthesize the raw information, structure it logically, and vocalize it.
And that friction builds the memory.
Exactly. That friction physically strengthens the neural pathways associated with that specific memory. Therefore, the modern educator's primary objective is to maximize what is known as student talk time.
And our sources laid out some specific structural tools teachers use to force this, right? The mechanics behind them are fascinating.
They are very clever.
Like they use digital Jamboards where students collaboratively map out ideas using sticky notes in breakout rooms. They use dice rolls to gamify grammar practice. You roll a die, and the resulting number dictates which specific verb tense you have to use in your argument.
Yes, and then there's the four-square discussion.
Explain that one because it sounded really effective.
The four-square discussion is a highly effective mechanism for behavioral modification. Students utilize a digital board divided into 4 distinct quadrants, each representing a conversational function.
Like agreeing, disagreeing.
Exactly. Agreeing, disagreeing, asking for clarification, and adding a new point. During a live debate, every time a student uses a phrase associated with one of those quadrants, they physically move a digital token into that square to track their usage and earn points.
Why does the physical act of moving a token change the dynamic so drastically?
It externalizes the internal social friction. Normally, the social pressure of looking a peer in the eye and disagreeing with them is incredibly high.
Oh, yeah. It's super uncomfortable.
But by attaching that verbal action to a game mechanic earning points to hit a target score, the student is no longer attacking their classmate's idea. They are simply executing a required move within the rules of the game.
Oh, wow. It dramatically lowers the psychological stakes of conflict.
Exactly. It tricks the brain into engaging.
That is brilliant. But there is one specific tool mentioned in the IELTS preparation sources that I really want to push back on.
Okay, what is it?
The student as teacher script. The sources detail how teachers will hand a student a literal word-for-word script to read out loud to their partner.
Yes, the scripts.
The script will say something like, "One of my favorite words so far this month is, let's practice pronouncing it. Repeat after me."
Right.
If the entire pedagogical goal is to foster organic, natural communication, doesn't handing someone a rigid script to read make them sound completely robotic, like a customer service rep?
It seems highly counterintuitive.
Yeah.
We absolutely prize authenticity and natural flow in conversation. But we have to return to the concept of cognitive load we discussed earlier.
Okay, the RAM in the brain.
Right. When you are learning a complex new skill, whether it's a foreign language, an advanced negotiation tactic, or a new software framework, your brain's RAM is completely maxed out just trying to comprehend the core substance of the material.
Your brain is basically redlining, just trying to understand the facts.
Exactly. And if you concurrently demand that the learner figure out the social mechanics of initiating the conversation, deciding who speaks first, how to transition smoothly, how to politely disagree, the system crashes.
So the script helps with that.
Providing a written script acts as conversational training wheels.
It offloads the social RAM.
Precisely. By giving learners explicit turn-taking ritual scripts like, I'll go first, I totally agree with your point, or your turn, you completely remove the anxiety of how to enter the conversation.
Which frees up their brain to focus on the actual lesson.
Yes. It allows their entire mental capacity to focus purely on the content they're trying to master. Once the neural pathways for the content are securely established, the training wheels are removed, and authentic, organic phrasing develops naturally.
You know, we actually see this exact principle deployed with young children, just disguised as play.
Oh, absolutely.
Activities like show and tell, where a child brings in a toy to discuss, or circle time, where the unbreakable rule is that you are only allowed to speak if you are holding the designated talking stick.
The physical object is the training wheel.
Right. It removes all ambiguity about turn-taking. It grants absolute permission to speak, bypassing the hesitation.
It's the exact same psychological mechanism, just scaled up for adults.
Now, everything we have discussed so far happens under the watchful, engineered supervision of the instructor. But the true test of a learning environment is the informal, unstructured language used between peers to survive the system.
Hallway track.
A hallway track.
The hallway track represents the sociological underbelly of the educational ecosystem. It is where students engage in what linguists call phatic communion.
Which means?
It's language used primarily for general social interaction and establishing atmosphere, rather than conveying deep, factual information.
Right, so the sources start with the basic phrases used to build social bridges, asking things like, is this seat free? Or moving slightly deeper to find common ground with questions like, do you play football? Or what's your favorite food?
The standard small talk.
Yeah, but it goes so much deeper than small talk. It's about establishing alliances. And honestly, nothing builds an alliance faster than shared struggle.
Oh, definitely.
The hallway track is where students navigate the system together, relying on the universal language of the homework excuse.
The anatomy of the homework excuse is a fascinating study in early negotiation tactics and blame shifting.
The absolute gold standard, listed right there in the materials, is the legendary, "The dog ate my homework," which, realistically, has any dog ever actually consumed a physical algebra worksheet?
Probably not. But the literal veracity of the dog's appetite is entirely beside the point.
Right.
As a psychological tactic, it is a calculated attempt to shift culpability to an uncontrollable third-party vector. It removes human agency from the failure. The student isn't lazy. They are the victim of a chaotic act of nature.
And then you have the slightly more strategic variations, like, I left it in my mom's car.
Ah, yes.
With this excuse, you are firmly asserting that the intellectual labor was completed, you did the work, you simply failed the logistical delivery.
It's a very different defense.
But the absolute masterful stall tactic is, I didn't know it was due today.
Notice the subtle structural shift in that specific excuse, stating, I didn't know it was due, subtly indicts the instructor's communication skills. It frames a failure as a systemic lack of clarity, rather than a personal lack of effort. It is a highly defensive negotiation aimed squarely at securing an extension without admitting fault.
It is brilliant self-preservation. But beyond the excuses, the hallway track is heavily coated with idioms.
Yes, the inside jokes of the classroom.
Exactly. Calling a peer a bookworm, or telling someone they are going to pass with flying colors, or declaring that you need to go hit the books.
Right.
Here is my fundamental question about idioms. If efficiency is so highly prized in communication and simple language works perfectly well, why say hit the books? Why not just use the literal word study?
Because literal language merely transfers data, but metaphorical language triggers a completely different neurological response.
Really?
Yes, when you use an idiom like hit the books, functional MRI scans show that sensory and motor cortices in the brain actually light up. Idioms carry deep emotional weight and cultural history.
So they aren't meant to be efficient.
No, not at all. Their primary function is to signal in-group belonging.
So using the idiom proves you aren't just a tourist translating words from a dictionary.
It demonstrates fluency in the culture itself, not just the grammar. When a learner successfully deploys an idiom or a natural phrase with a peer, it serves as a secret handshake.
A secret handshake. I love that.
They cross an invisible threshold from being an outsider to an insider. It cements their place in the social hierarchy of the hallway track.
The secret handshake. You know, it really reframes everything about the learning experience. The classroom isn't just a place to absorb static facts.
No, not at all.
Whether you are mastering the raw courage to ask an open-ended question that exposes your confusion, or you're adapting to the stark, efficient directness of an American professor, or relying on conversational training wheels to keep your cognitive load from maxing out the classroom, is the ultimate training ground for life.
You are learning the hidden mechanics of human interaction.
Every single time.
You're learning how to navigate complex social matrices every time you step into a room. And looking back at the sources, particularly the science of the learning cone, I would like to leave you with a final thought to consider regarding how we structure our professional lives.
Oh, right. The metric showing the massive difference between 90% retention for active teaching versus 10% for passive listening.
Exactly. If cognitive science has proven, without a shadow of a doubt, that we retain a tiny fraction of what we passively consume, and we only truly master what we actively teach.
We have to look critically at the professional world.
We do. Why is almost every corporate training program, university lecture, and modern office meeting still structured around one authority figure standing at the front of a room, broadcasting information, while everyone else sits quietly taking notes?
We are essentially institutionalizing the 10% retention rate across society.
We are. So what would happen if you completely flip the script in your own environment? What if, in your next team meeting, workshop, or study session, you demanded that the learners do all the talking?
That would force the entire room into that 90% retention zone. The invisible signs on the wall of that room would instantly rewrite themselves.
It would completely change the dynamic.
It is a profound way to look at how we spend our time. Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden world of the classroom. Now it is time for you to go out there, hit the books, and better yet, find someone and teach them exactly what you just learned. We'll catch you next time.